Good morning. All right, we are in week 6, the final week of a series on friendship. Who should you be friends with? How should you be friends with them? What does that look like? Some practical advice for staying friends with people. And throughout all of this, I've been trying to tell my own little anecdotes of bizarro friendships I've had and the strange things that have come along with that. And in prepping this talk, I was kind of talking to my wife, like, what's the weirdest stories that I haven't told yet about my friends? She immediately, without pausing, goes, well, you got to tell the stories about, and says a guy's name, and I was like, oh, that's right. Those are some very strange days in my life, not only because of the behavior of this other guy, but also because of replaying the story from the perspective of anyone else's perspective. I also made some odd choices. But anyway, maybe the starting question for you going into this is, who is the bad influence? Who's doing the strangest behavior? So one night, I was with a buddy of mine, and we just watched a movie called Fight Club. And it's all about guys getting together and beating each other up and how capitalism is evil and you should beat each other up because of that. Maybe I misunderstood the movie.
I agree with that.
Wow, that was like the most passionate he's been about any of my talks, and it was agreeing with Fight Club. Anyway, so we just watched this movie. It's like 1 in the morning, and we went, well, obviously now we need to do our own Fight Club. So we went, who is nearby that we can recruit to volunteer them for us to try and beat them up? Totally normal thought at 1 in the morning on a Saturday night. Yeah. So we went over to this gentleman's house that I won't say his name. And we show up at his house, knock on the door, and his little brother opens the door like, hello, as if it was normal for someone to show up at his house at 1 in the morning looking to fight, like pumped up, ready to fight. We're like, we would love to find your brother and fight him. And he goes, oh, perfect, I'd love that. So he takes us upstairs and to his brother's room, opens the door, and trying to not be too graphic here, but our friend was asleep, so maybe we shouldn't have been doing this, and he was sleeping in the nude on this occasion, and he jumps out of bed, and he's covered in jelly, which is just as strange in this story as it was at the moment that it happened. Like, what is going on here? He goes, hey, what are you guys doing in my house? Like, well, we wanted to do Fight Club until now, because this just got weird. He goes, all right, let's do Fight Club then. So he throws some clothes on. We walk downstairs, and as we approach the door, he picks up a shoe and just smacks his brother across the face as hard as he can, pushes us out the front door, and locks the door. And that's the last time I ever spoke to him. Anyway, so he's like, guys, it's 1 in the morning. What are you doing at my house? And like, in retrospect, maybe we shouldn't have showed up at his house, forced our way in, and demanded that he fight us at 1 in the morning. But all the other details in there also were equally weird. As a nice little epilogue to this story, this exact same person asked my wife to prom shortly after this incident took place, and it completely disconnected. We just happen to know a lot of the same people. So she turns him down and also never spoke to him ever again. He shows up to prom dressed as Goku. So this story, the payoff of this story could have been Jennifer falls in love with the guy that sleeps naked and covered in jelly and marries the guy that went to prom dressed as Goku, and that's the parents of my children. So alternate life kind of name where this gentleman. So anyway, this barely ties into anything I'm talking about. I just had one more bizarro story I had to share. But the question is, who's the bad influence in this story? Who behaved worse? In retrospect, it used to be this strange story of how weird he was, and then I went, wait, is this a story of how weird and inappropriate I am? As we close out this series on friendship, what we're talking about is the tension sometimes between different biblical values of what we're called to do and at the same time of what we're called to be. And that idea of who's the bad influence, who's influencing who, who's pulling who in which direction gets really, really important in this discussion. Because the Bible tells us to do multiple things, and sometimes they're not immediately, obviously, in the same direction. In particular, when it comes to friendships, and how we're supposed to relate to people. So principle number one, big idea all throughout the Bible, especially so overtly clear in the New Testament, God moves towards sinners. God moves towards sinners. So this is a truth in the Bible that is which one is it? This one right here. Truth in the Bible, Jesus was a friend of sinners. Jesus headed towards sinners. It says in Luke 5, when Levi had a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, who belonged to their sect, complained to the disciples, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Jesus answered them, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. So, biblical principle. God moves towards sinners. God loves all people. Jesus was friends of sinners and didn't think about it in terms of the good people, the bad people. I'm going to stay with the good people. Jesus didn't think that way. He was drawn towards sinners, called towards them. Jesus intentionally moved towards sinful people. He didn't avoid sinners. He built relationships with them. And it doesn't just say he treated them like projects and sat down to do a presentation to them. He ate with them. He was friends with them. Built actual relationship with them. And this idea that so often Christians can get in their mind of like compartmentalizing us and them. No. Jesus, there wasn't that. He went to people far from God. Quick application for yourself. Do you have friends that are non-Christians? Are you building relationships with all sorts of people that are different from yourself? What does that look like? Are you outward focused? But there's a second principle that comes in conflict with this one, because this one says, go and make friends with all kinds of people. The Bible also, principle number 2, God calls us to flee evil and pursue righteousness. So, this other idea is that we're supposed to pursue righteousness. We're supposed to flee sin. And you can immediately start to see where a tension can form in the middle of this. Go to sinners, but flee sin. There's a tension built into that idea. It says in 2 Timothy 2, flee from evil desires of youth and pursue righteousness. Don't do this, do this. Faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. So, pursue good things with people that are also pursuing good things. That's a biblical principle. James 1:27, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So, okay, what is true religion? Take care of people, but stay pure and righteous. You see the tension once again. Stay pure, but also go out. Go to the world, be in the world, be friends with people in the world, but don't be polluted by it. There's a tension there, and then it says pretty overtly what this principle that your parents have probably taught you your whole life. 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. We all know that if you hang around bad people, they'll influence you. Be careful who you're friends with. That's what several talks in this series were about. Making sure you're friends with the right people that will help you, sharpen you, make you be a better person. But also, we want you to be friends with others, people that are far from God. There's a tension built into this, a conflict built right into it. Like, all right, how do you obey both of these? What exactly does that look like? And as having done youth ministry, I've just lived life. I just go through all sorts of stories of people that started making friends with wrong people and seeing the consequence of it. Actually, the starting story about the Fight Club, I said I watched Fight Club with this one guy. The guy I watched Fight Club with, right around that exact same time period, started making friends with some different friends groups. He was a guy that I grew up with in church, knew him from church. He did all the same activities, D groups, Great Adventure, that most of you have done if you've been around here for a while. But after high school, he just started kind of drifting a little bit, trying to find his place in the friends that he wanted to connect with. And so he connected with a specific friend group that were very far from God. And at first, he kind of like talked about some of the positives that came from that, but he just kind of kept going further and further down a path where he was more and more disconnected from anything church Christian based and was more and more pursuing people over there. Actually, the guy that he became friends with, called him Seth the 77 Punk because he looked like a caricature of a punk rocker from the 70s. He like literally wore black leather jackets and had like a mohawk that stuck up off his head. It was like literally a caricature of a person. And that's who my friend was spending more and more time with. And then one day I was hanging out with him and he talked about, I was over at Seth's house and man, it got pretty wild. Like he had to call his drug dealer and so he had to prepare for him to come over, so he had to get a gun out to put it under a pillow in case something went down. And so I'm just sitting on the couch while this happened. It was pretty wild. And he said it so casually, as if it was a normal thing to just kind of throw out there, that I was in the living room of my friend's house and we were preparing for a drug deal with guns. I don't know about you, but that's not an average Tuesday for me. And the thing, it wasn't just that he was in that situation, but he'd gone so far down a path that to him that had almost become a normal day that he didn't immediately go, maybe I should stop being friends with the person that's about to get me shot. But he didn't have that realization. He kept drifting in that direction and kept breaking off more and more ties with church world to the extent that, he basically abandoned the faith very shortly after that. So there's this tension between we're called to flee sin, but also go and make friends of sinners, the way Jesus did. And so it's just kind of like a little illustration of this. There's things in this world that are problems to be solved and tensions to be managed, where if you pick one side here with our tension, and you go, all right, we're going to be all about pursuing holiness, and you pick a side and you solve the problem. It's not about living in the tension. It's about solving the problem. If you choose that, you're abandoning God's heart. God's heart is that we love people. All people are made in God's image. We're supposed to love all of them. And so if you decide, I'm only going to solve the problem, we're going to take the rubber band fully off, no tension, we're just doing this. I'm going to pursue holiness and not love people. You've abandoned God's heart. You've solved the problem, but you've abandoned God's heart, which in and of itself is kind of a big problem. God loves people. But on the flip side, you go, I'm going to solve the problem. I'm just friends of the world. I'm not super worried about holiness. I'm not super worried about avoiding sin. But I love people. I know a lot of people. All of a sudden, you're compromised. It's a tension that you manage. Both are true. I am supposed to pursue holiness and love people that are far from God. And there's no simple answer. There's no easy fix. It's a tension that you live in. And we all kind of go back and forth on this tension, just exactly what it looks like. But tension is supposed to be uncomfortable. Tension, there's always a little bit of this, and we want to solve it. And you can go through different kind of groups of people, monks that have created their own communes separate from the world. Like, well, we're supposed to be holy and separate, so they create their own little commune, Christian commune, away from everyone else. Okay, but you forgot that God sent his son to people far from God. And we have been sent. You can't pick one or the other. You can't abandon righteousness to be friends with the world, and you can't abandon God's heart for the world in order for righteousness. It's a tension that we live in consistently. I had a friend of mine, his solution to this, it wasn't that he abandoned one or the other, but he treated them as like two separate things. So it's like separate and righteous. Here we go. He did like two different things to his solution to the tension. On the one hand, like very sheltered from the world, didn't watch TV, movies, anything like that, like very, very boxed off. But also was very evangelistic. But it meant he treated everyone as a project. He wasn't friends with people far from God. They were a project that he would do a presentation for. So he knew every evangelistic tactic to share the gospel with them, but he didn't have a relationship with them. And so they're trying to resolve the tension by having no tension. But Jesus was a friend of sinners, which is messy. It's difficult. It's not a clean answer. It's a tension that you live in, not a problem to solve, because both are always true in fundamental principles of the faith. We're so called to be holy. Jesus died on the cross so you could be holy, but also he died to reach people, and we are his mechanism to do that. Both must be true. It's a tension you live in. So to kind of go back through this one more time, back to Luke 5, and walk through some of the pieces. What is this? How can we look like? Where do we go off? It says in Luke 5, and this is what we read, then Levi had a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to the sect complained to the disciples, why are you eating and drinking with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. So, big principle. Jesus moved towards sinners without moving the standard. So Jesus went to sinners, but Jesus did not sin with sinners. He went and loved them, but he still had his standards that he lived by, and he did not compromise them. He did not become like the people he went towards. He tried to help them become more like him. And so it's like a doctor going to a sick person. The point isn't for the doctor to get sick, it's for the doctor to bring medicine. Jesus went and loved people far from himself. I had one story as I was talking with Jennifer that kind of, she reminded me of something that happened where she had a friend, wasn't a Christian, but curious, and had a lot of health issues. And it was kind of an interesting one because it was like the friend to pursue healing was pursuing a shaman to do like a faith healing of her. And she came to us to like ask what we thought about faith healings from a shaman. And it was actually a really complex conversation because it's like, do you believe that God can heal people like this? It's like, do I believe God can do that? Yes. What does it mean if this shaman does it? I don't know. But we're like sitting, like the person trusted in us because we're friends with her enough that in the middle of her crisis, she came to us, even when asking kind of an unusual question about faith healings from a shaman. And we ended up like having a long conversation about faith, gospel healings, Jesus, his presence in the world that came about because we built a friendship there so much so the person trusted us that they could have like I don't know, it's the sort of question when someone asks something and they don't even know what is and isn't a normal question to ask you, which is a great place to be with someone that's truly curious. Another story that kind of came to mind, I almost wasn't going to share this one because it's a story that in and of itself lives in this tension that I was nervous, like, if I share this, people might judge me over the nature of this person that I know, but that's like the whole point of the talk, is that we need to meet people that are far from God. So, through a set of circumstances, I'll put this next picture up here. Here we go. So, if you don't know, the clown is Art the Clown, the main villain in a series of films called the Terrifier films that are known for being like the most hardcore, like killer clown movies out there right now. And the guy standing next to it, that's Damien, that's the guy that invented Art the Clown. So they're very, very violent movies. Don't watch them. I'm not recommending you watch them. But that's where the tension in this story comes up. Because I'm actually kind of buddies with the guy that created Art the Clown, to some extent. I don't know how to exactly define it, but he knows me, I know him. I was at the world premiere of his last movie. He saw me, he was excited to see me. So whatever you want to define that as, I know this guy. And I've talked with him about Jesus in the context of these movies that he makes that are very violent because they have biblical allegories in them. So he even opened the door to have a faith-based conversation with him. And like I said, as someone that teaches at church, being like, well, I know the guy that invented Art the Clown with the people getting hacked to pieces by the killer clown. There's a side to it where you go, whoa, why are you associating with that guy? Because Jesus is friends with sinners. And so a guy that is making the movies that's like by stereotypes farthest from God, they're so violent. You're not wrong. But he's still a person made in God's image that needs the gospel. And through a set of weird circumstances, I know the guy, and I've been able to talk with him about Jesus. And there's many windows where I might be able to continue to have those conversations with him, and I've actually, like, as odd as it even sounds, has some questions I want to ask him in regards to some of this to continue those conversations with him. First question, you go, well, flee from sin, pursue righteousness, but also, how do you have to reach people far from God. And so there's a tension built into that. And it's messy, it's not simple. I don't know what the answer is. But there's not supposed to be an answer. That's the point. It's a tension to manage, not clean lines here and there. But in the passage, there's three groups of people. You've got the sinners that Jesus was being judged for going to them. You have the Pharisees who were doing the judging. And then you have Jesus and the disciples who were living in the tension. So you got sinners, obviously not too worried about any one of these. The Pharisees, they've picked a side. Pharisees did this. We're separate. A lot of times when we talk about the Pharisees, they're the villains of the New Testament. They're causing trouble for Jesus. They're the antagonists, which is true, but it's incomplete. They were the religious leaders, and almost everything they were saying was based on a biblical truth. It started with some biblical principle that was a good thing, but it was incomplete. And so much of it was they left out God's heart for the lost. That's what Jesus came to make it clear. God loves people. I have been sent for people who are sinners, far from God. And the Pharisees missed that piece, and they were all righteousness. Don't be a Pharisee. Don't be the one that is so separate that all you do is judge people far from God. And then likewise, don't just be a sinner either. It's a tension that we're supposed to live in. And there's so many ways, in particular in modern times, where a kind of a whole Christian subculture is formed. And sometimes it's kind of amusing to me, but like it's easy to kind of just get in the Christian bubble. And we do our things and they have their things. Like there's even like Christian toys, there's Christian video games, Christian superheroes. I thought this one was funny when I first discovered this one. There's Bible Man, which like Spider-Man is too controversial, so we need Bible Man. I haven't followed any Bible. I can't say, maybe incredible stuff. Maybe there's like really nuanced character. I have no clue. But it's kind of funny that Superman, he's not wholesome enough. We need our own. And here's an even funnier one from the 90s. There's a video game that came out called Wolfenstein 3D. One of the first 3D shooters, and you ran around killing Nazis. So, yeah, it's the good old days. A company came up with an idea. That game's cool, but it's too violent. They stole the code for Wolfenstein 3D, and they made Noah's Ark 3D. So if you can show this next picture, it's literally the same layout. They stole the code. They just changed out guns for like feeding bags. And instead of Nazis, you're like shooting animals with food or something like that. But you can look it up. This is a real thing that happened. That like, we're going to build our own little Christian subculture away from their stuff. So we have our own stuff over here. I get it. As a parent, I totally get trying to protect your kids and things like that. Some of it's comedically over the top. But also, if we're building all of these walls to keep ourselves out from the world, we're kind of missing the point. That at the end of the day, there's not actually a different category of people, the good people and the sinners, because all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All of us. The church is not filled with the good people, it's filled with just the sinners that are at church. And you can't build up walls to change the fact that all of us are sinners on the inside. And then, of course, on the flip side to it, some of the big issue with some of you, it's not the pursuing righteousness or sheltering yourself. Some of you, in particular, like in speaking to teenagers, and this, like, some of this gets pretty easy because it's like if you're homeschooled by your Christian parents, you probably tend to drift in this direction a little bit more because you live in a world that's a little bit controlled by your parents. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But you can end up in this box. And if you're at public school, at lunchroom table with a bunch of people that are crazy as can be, it's real easy to like, well, I want to fit in. I want to make friends. And, well, I can't control what they joke about. It's really easy to drift towards this one in a public school setting. But it's a tension you have to balance. Which one do you drift towards and which one do you need to counterbalance more? And some of you, You're not even thinking about the tension. You're just sitting at the lunchroom table trying to make friends, make people laugh, not even thinking about, maybe I shouldn't be joking about that. So with the last few minutes, how do we resolve the tension? How do we kind of find the balance in all of this? We've talked about a few weeks back the 4 levels of friendship. And as we finish all of this up, the whole idea is to kind of pull back, tie some threads together. We talked about several weeks back about the importance of a lot of times the people you meet here, we want them to be lifelong friends because you have a shared faith in Jesus. Perhaps you're doing life ministry together, doing Bible clubs or something, you're in D group together. And so you start doing life, holding each other accountable. The reason that this is so important, and we started with this, is that we want to have friends that anchor you and have friends that help you with this tension right here and help you learn how to live in this, whichever way it needs to look like for you. Big idea, you need level 4 friends so you can live on mission. How can you both pursue righteousness and be friends with sinners? Well, also have friends that are deeply rooted in Christ, that you're living life together with. And so it's not just you kind of doing your own thing. When you have friends that are level 4 friends holding you accountable, doing life with them, they can push you. Maybe if you need to get out of your comfort zone and have some conversations about Jesus with some people, they can push you to do that, or they can hold you back and see when you're the one that's starting to be influenced rather than doing the influencing. On the whole, like if you tend to be a little bit more in the righteousness box, they can push you to share your faith. If you tend to be more on the friend of sinners side, the compromising side, they pull you back. Or I only had one of these neat images of myself. We can put this picture out here. That's the best AI could come up with me this week. I told it to re-render it. I reminded it what I look like, and that's what it thinks I look like, which is interesting. But yeah, it's pretty good. Also, I like the way the belt is coming out of my shirt, I think. I'm not really sure what's going on there.
Can I ask why Adam Sandler is
Well, Adam Sandler is holding my belt so I don't fall off the cliff. But the idea of having those deep friends that care about you, share your values, you can be friends with sinners and you have other people that are holding onto your belt. They're holding you back from being foolish. They can be that person that can let you know, like, hey, I think you're making some bad choices. Maybe you need to pull it back a little bit. And the whole point isn't that you do this alone, but we do this in community. That we're meant to love people. And then we're out of time. Big idea. You have to decide before you have to decide. How do you live in the tension? How do you maintain righteousness, maintain your standards while being friends with people far from God that have different standards? Well, know what your standards are on the front end. Just decide, like, I'm not going to say this, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to drink that, I'm not going to go to this party, I'm not going to cross these lines. Decide before you have to decide. Know who you are and what you value before you're in the situation. Therefore, when a moment comes where you're at a party and someone pulls out the alcohol, pulls out the wacky tobacco, whatever it is, you've decided, I'm not going to do that. And so if you need to leave, if you need to call a parent, whatever that is, you've decided in advance. You're avoiding being in situations that will compromise this, but not compromise being friends with people. Even like, I was talking with my wife that she kind of became a Christian in high school. And so for the first 15 years of her life, her friends were just friends from school. And so she had all these friends from theater. And that looked one way in middle school. In high school, that started getting a little bit wilder and crazier, right as she started making church friends and getting plugged in. And she had to live in this whole tension all throughout high school as there was a group of friends that she was friends with them. She was the bridge between them and Jesus. And they were doing more and more things that she didn't feel comfortable with. So one of the things she did to maintain being righteousness was she ended up quitting theater because that group of friends was just heading so far in a direction that was a bad influence on her. But some of those people she remained friends with. And our kids have hung out together. We've continued to have connections there, conversations about life, everything that's happened. But she did have to drop theater as one mechanism of remaining pure. And that's where it's messy. There's not simple answers. That's what the choice she made. It was best for her to be able to maintain friendships, but also maintain purity and holiness. But there's not clean answers. It's not easy. It's a tension you live in. And that's why you need people in your life that can help you manage that, can see your blind spots, can push you further. And so as we close out, which one do you drift towards? Do you tend to be I'm a little bit too sheltered. Don't know a lot of people that are far from God. Or are you, all right, maybe I'm a little bit too in the world. Maybe there's a few too many things influencing me. Which one is it? Where is the balance, the tension off for you? And what do you need to do with it? Do you need to be more intentional about meeting more people that believe things differently than you? Do you need to maybe dial back some friendships and set some boundaries and go, I need to stop hanging out with some of those people because that's not a good influence? I don't know. Like I said, all of these things, everyone's life, everyone's situation is specific and different. And that's why you need a community of people that share your beliefs, that know you, know your weaknesses, know your strengths, and can challenge you to be that best version of yourself. Jesus didn't avoid sinners, but he didn't become like them. He lived on mission, and he's calling us to do the same, and he's calling us to do it in community. Let's pray.